It is an REM theme today. You probably caught on. Classic REM was the best I could come up with. But now we're going to talk about Goma. There was quite a bit in the news about Goma. You may have heard, you probably did. And basically what was happening is that the rebel group M23 was shelling and shooting rockets at Goma. So on this map here, you see Goma. And this is the border again with Rwanda. So we have Rwanda here and Congo here. And this is Uganda. And basically, M23 was here in Kibati, a little bit farther south. And they were fighting with the Congolese military. And some of the shells landed in Goma here. So I was actually at a restaurant, and I was having lunch with a member of the Congolese military, and we heard the first two explosions, and literally nobody moved. Nobody changed the way they were talking. It was like nothing had happened. And then he got a call on his phone, and I said, "Oh, was that about the shelling?" And he said, "Oh, you heard that?" Like, yeah, everybody heard it. And then a little while later, the third one came, and this was much closer, so it was much louder. And this time, people actually got up and asked for the bill. Classic check please situation. And then the officer got another call, and he turns to me and says, "The Rwandans are coming to take Goma, go home." This turned out not to be true, that the Rwandans were invading Goma, but it gives you a little bit of an insight into the way people are expecting things to happen. There have been many instances when Rwanda or Rwandan-backed military groups have controlled Goma, most recently in November of 2012, but also for years at a time, ever since 1996, off and on. So that's something that people are expecting almost. And really the only way you could tell that anything was really wrong, besides the explosions, because people seemed to be going about their business, was that the waitress came over and she was giving me the bill, and she was just shaking like a leaf. So while it doesn't necessarily become obvious all the time, sometimes that 20 years of war comes out in shaking or in crying or in some other trauma-induced reaction. So people are used to it to a certain extent, but you can't pretend it doesn't have an effect. And of course on the families of the people who were killed in the bombing. So far as I know, there were 4 killed in Goma and 1 in Gisenyi. And this is an important point. Gisenyi is just on the other side of the border here and is part of Rwanda. So when the shells hit in Rwanda, there were accusations on the part of the Rwandan government that it was in fact the Congolese military that was bombing Gisenyi. The UN force, MONUSCO, and the Congolese military said no, it was actually the rebel group M23 that also shelled Gisenyi. But Rwandan authorities were quick to say they would be defending their territory, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there was a significant escalation there at this point. It was definitely worrisome. And as far as the fighting goes, the UN force is fighting with the Congolese military. And so you can see here in Goma, they pushed M23 out of Kibati, and they moved on. So they pushed them out of Kibati, even out of Kibumba, which was significant because Kibumba was the last place that the rebel group M23 was stationed that had a direct road into Rwanda. So the thinking is, having pushed M23 farther north, the only way that they can be resupplied is through Uganda or through Rwanda, but without roads. So that was a pretty significant thing for the Congolese military. I mean, as far as people tell me. I'm not really a military analyst. On the 24th, there was more bombing, or shelling, and the first shell in the morning hit a woman's house and killed her. And there was just kind of this rising up of the population in anger about this continued this continued violence. And these protests were literally thousands and thousands of people in the street carrying the woman's body to MONUSCO, the UN military or stabilization mission, and they wanted to also protest against Rwanda. So for just a little bit of background, most Congolese see the M23 rebel group as just an arm of Rwanda, and that's why they wanted to march to Rwanda, to show their lack of appreciation for said support, and also to MONUSCO. MONUSCO is the UN mission that was started, it was originally in 1999. In July 2010, it became officially MONUSCO, where they could have up to almost 20,000 military personnel in the country to help stabilize the country. But even with 20,000 military personnel, you cannot pacify a region the size of North and South Kivu. It's just a huge area, and a lot of it's forest. So they had a job that was really hard to live up to, and of course they made some pretty stupid mistakes along the way. But in March of 2013, March of this year, they added, for the first time ever, the UN approved an offensive mandate for an oversized battalion, a brigade rather. So 3,069 troops were approved to come in from South Africa, Tanzania, and hunt down rebel groups. And that had huge expectations. And on the 24th, when this shell got through and killed someone, the population was saying, we expected to be defended. We expected that you would go take care of M23, and obviously M23 isn't taken care of. So there was a lot of anger there. Unfortunately, during the protests, also two of the protesters were killed, which also people are accusing MONUSCO, the UN troops, of having done that. I think that's pretty unlikely, but I wasn't there. When I was there, the things that I saw were the police shooting into the air and using tear gas canisters to control the crowd. But I certainly didn't see any MONUSCO folks firing on the crowd. So I think it's probably pretty unlikely, considering their mandate. But that's what people are worried about, or that's what people are saying happened. So that's very bad news for MONUSCO. On the same day, the 24th, you can write it down in your calendar, 24th of, what month was it? 24th of August, first time ever in history that a UN force has taken the offensive, and they were fighting alongside the Congolese military. So that was pretty significant. In fact, a Tanzanian soldier was also killed during the fighting as it went on to the 28th. But on the other hand, they were fairly successful in pushing M23 back, and so I think there could be some positive things said about MONUSCO now from a military standpoint. There also big in the news was Rwanda sending troops, armored personnel carriers, to the border with the Congo. Everybody's sort of worried about what Rwanda will do next. But there's been an extraordinary session of the local governments to come together in Kampala and talk things out so that it doesn't escalate further. So at least for the moment, as of the 3rd of September, things are fairly calm in Goma. I was there a couple days ago, and there weren't any problems at the airport. Things were fairly calm. So MONUSCO has been authorized to use all necessary force to protect the population, and now is carrying out some serious offensive operations. So it's a new day, I guess you could say. Here's another picture. I should say the first one of the woman being carried, that was from France 24, the news agency. This is a picture I took. More of the same, people protesting on that day. And here's the quote / tweet / Facebook post of the day. It's all in the same, because it's my friend Patrick Maxwell putting a Facebook post of a tweet which includes a quote. It says, as Rwandan troops are gathering on the border, the Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN for Rwanda said, quote, according to the US, an assessment of a government can be used as basis for military strikes. Without taking into account a report of the UN, I agree, end quote. And Patrick makes the comment, U.S. lawmakers, please consider the example you set to the rest of the world. Yeah, so while the UN is saying that it was M23 that fired the rockets and shells that landed in Gisenyi in Rwanda, the Rwandan government is saying, we'll be the judge of that, and we don't care what the UN thinks. U.S. gave us a good example of how that's going to happen, how that can happen. So once again, kind of an example of fallout of U.S. policy, or maybe just the selective use of foreign policy by other governments. So that's something to follow. But that's what's going on right now in Goma. Next chapter, Walikale.